Imagine climbing a 200-meter high rock in middle of Sri Lanka's dry zone. At the summit, you'll find the ruins of an ancient palace. Below lies perfectly symmetrical water gardens, reservoirs, moats, landscape avenues that still function after nearly 1500 years. It almost sounds mythical, right? And perhaps that's why the internet loves telling a completely wrong story. Many visitors, especially Indians, are told by social media influencers that this was Ravana's palace from Ramayana, or that these gardens were where Sita was held captive, which is the Ashok Vatika. But archaeology tells a very different story. Sigiriya was not built by a king mentioned in the Ramayana, but built by another king whose mention is found in many Buddhist texts. A king who murdered his father, stole a throne, and feared revenge from his own brother, and then attempted one of the most ambitious architectural projects in South Asian history. This is the story of Sigiriya, not the legend, but the archaeology. Hi, my name is Tisha Aluwalia, and welcome to The Print. Today, Sigiriya stands at the center of Sri Lanka's famous cultural triangle, along with Anuradhapura, Polonnaruwa, and Dambulla. It was declared as UNESCO's World Heritage Site in 1982. Every year, millions climb the rock fortress to admire the spectacular view and the engineering. But few realize that this dramatic monument existed for less than 20 years as a royal capital before it was abandoned. To understand why, we have to go back to the 5th century. Around 1455 CE, King Datusena emerged victorious after defeating the last of six Pandya rulers who had held control over Anuradhapura. His reign transformed Sri Lanka. Instead of expanding through military conquest, he invested in heavy irrigation. Massive man made reservoirs, tanks, and canals were constructed to channel water across the dry plains, dramatically improving agriculture in the region. Even today, the entire hydraulic system installed and created by him continues to function, demonstrating the remarkable engineering knowledge of ancient Sri Lanka. And it is truly one of the markers, a very unique feature of Sri Lanka's landscape and its history. But while Datusena proved to be an effective ruler, his family was deeply divided. On a personal front, he was not very well liked. He had two sons. The elder son, Kashyap, was born to a concubine, whereas his younger son was born to the queen consort. Kashyap knew that the crown would not be legally his because he was born to a non royal blood, so he began to plot against his father. He sort of began a dramatic succession struggles. Turning point came after a family tragedy. Datusena's daughter had died unexpectedly, blaming this to his sister, who was also her mother-in-law. The grieving king ordered the execution of his own sister by burning. Her son, Megara, who was also the king's son in law, turned against him. Megara he was a commander of the army, of the military. He aligned himself with Kashyapa and his motive of taking the throne for himself. Together, they both launched a rebellion, and by 473 CE, Kashyapa was overthrown by his father and was imprisoned. According to an ancient chronicle, Kashyapa demanded to know where the treasure were hidden. Instead of revealing the jewels and the gold, Datasena asked to be taken to one of the great reservoirs and pointed to that and said, "This is my treasure." This really infuriated Kashyapa. Standing before the water, he declared that the irrigation system is not his wealth but his true treasure. Kashyapa ordered execution of his father. Some traditions say that he was burnt alive, whereas some other traditions say that he was entombed alive within a wall. Either way, Kashyapa seized the throne. He won the game of throne. Meanwhile, the rightful heir, the Mogalana, pardon my pronunciation, escaped to South India, where he began preparing for his return. Kashyapa knew that his reign would never be secure, or rather, he was sort of insecure. That's what one part of the history suggests. We don't know the exact story, but whatever happened is that he abandoned Anuradhapura and moved his capital to Sigiriya near the 200-meter rock, which is with geological marvel, a rock which is standing covered by thick plain of forest and land. Here, he commissioned one of the most ambitious palace complexes in the ancient world. He asked to build on the summit the royal palace. So, 200 meters on the summit of Sigiriya Rock. So, if you look on the internet, Sigiriya, you'll see one giant rock, which is is an igneous rock, red rock, which is standing alone. And apart from that, there is Pudurangala rock, which is opposite to it. But largely you see a forest around it and plain land. So it is one geological formation in the middle of nearly nothing. So he asked the people to build a royal palace on top of the summit. And at the bottom, below the rock, he carefully designed gardens, which were symmetrical gardens, which had reservoirs, pools, fountains, pavilions. It was also had a defensive wall, the ramparts, and the moats. The entire landscape were really transformed by Kashyapa. For decades, historians believe that Kashyapa built a Sigiriya as a purely military fortress because the legend states that he built Sigiriya fort because he was insecure of a rebellion from his half brother. But the story seems many scholars they do not agree with this justification. A king who stole the throne and expected his exiled brother to return to the army didn't feel a very conducive, very a just explanation. Naturally, he wanted a fortress which would be impossible to attack, and Sigiriya is impregnable. And if you have been to Sigiriya, you would know that's it's a difficult climb. So did rock did offer that advantage, but archaeology complicates this explanation. Sri Lankan archaeologists argue that if the defense had truly been the primary objective, much of Sigiriya would simply makes no military sense in terms of the presence of military architecture. It, of course, was walled, had two gateways, but apart from that, it doesn't really show the intent. The enormous pleasure gardens, the hydraulic system, the ornamental pools, elegant pavilion define luxury, not warfare. The famous gardens remain among the earliest example of highly symmetrical landscape of architecture, highly symmetrical landscape architecture anywhere in South Asia. Long before the Mughal gardens of India, Sigiriya demonstrated sophisticated hydraulic engineering and geometric planning. Water channels were laid out with remarkable precision at the site. A lot of historians argued that before Kashyapa, Sigiriya didn't have any history, but at the bottom of the rock there are 20 caves, and in that there are Brahmi inscriptions dated there are Brahmi inscriptions dated to 2nd century BCE, which mention that Buddhist monks occupied these caves, these natural caves, and the ledges and grooves in this cave show that there must have been some sort of masonry attached to these caves, and also many caves are plastered and then exhibit high glossy finish even today. So it shows that there is a possibility that the site was already occupied. Plus, there are megalithic sites in the region which are dated to 6th century BCE, and therefore it shows that if not Sigiriya immediately around the rock of Sigiriya, but the region was very much occupied by people before Kaspa has arrived at the site. Rather than creating Sigiriya from nothing, he incorporated the sacred landscape as well. So visitors who ascend the rock today first pass through these cave complexes, the monastic complexes, the reservoirs, very importantly, because as you enter the complex, you see the tanks and the reservoirs along with the wall which run parallel, and then you come across these gardens and these monastic evidence and architectural features that are on the ground level. And then as you move towards the rock, you are greeted by flight of stairs, and then you which are made of stone, and then you take that, and as you keep climbing, you come across you come across a juncture which today is used by many to rest for a bit before climbing to the summit. The visitors come across a giant lion paws which have survived today. Originally, archaeologists believe the staircase emerged through the mouth of the enormous brick lion. From there, the visitors climbed the palace above through an iron railing, which is installed later after its discovery, which is quite a recent inclusion. At the summit, there are royal hall, there are gardens, and there are also reservoir. In fact, the reservoir have steps and the viewing platform spread across. There are also ramparts, which are the ramparts around the palace is at the edge of the rock, which makes it at par to the edge of the rock. From if you look at from below, you will see it as an extension of the rock itself, hidden beneath and but as you go to the west side of the rock, you find hidden beneath an overhanging cliff is a famous frescoes of the gallery. These frescoes are one of the most important murals of South Asian history. These which depict elegantly dressed women. Are some are named celestial figures, but some also believe that many are royal attendants. Why did this particular gallery was created? No one really know. But when it was discovered, it was very difficult to sort of go to the gallery and make copies. These copies are still at the Colombo Museum in Colombo. The archaeologist H.C. Bell, he states that when it was being copied, people who were doing this work were really scared for their life because it's a really high, it's at height, and there are no really staircase, but there are grooves which are left behind, which shows that there must have been some structure. Before you reached the frescoes, you have to cross the mirror wall, a wall which is there's a parapet which is beautifully plastered. It also have a lot of inscriptions of various patrons and later people who visited the sites. So for 18 years, Kashyapa ruled from Sigiriya, and according to Buddhist texts and other texts, he wished to create a palace which resembles the heavenly Alaknanda, and he wanted to be the god Kubera staying at top, the god of the great wealth. So a lot of whether the motive was fear or gradually ambition or vanity, Kashyapa succeeded in building something unlike anything else, not only just in the region but also entire South Asia. His kingdom was not South Asia. In 495 CE, his brother returned from South India with an army, and a decisive battle took place. Near Sigiriya. When the battle where during the fight, Kashyapa's elephant reportedly turned aside to avoid marshy ground. His soldiers mistakenly believed the king was retreating. The army broke ranks. Realizing the defeat was inevitable, Kashyapa had taken his own life. Many traditions believe that he has cut his throat and has died. With his death came with his death, Sigiriya's brief political career came to an abrupt end. The capital was shifted again to Anuradhapura, but the new king, Kashyapa's brother, has given the caves and the entire city to the Buddhist monks who have occupied the surrounding region. But slowly, this entire site was engulfed by jungles. It was reclaimed by jungles again. And for centuries, Sigiriya disappeared from history. Local communities knew the Great Rock, but there were a lot of superstitions regarding it. People believe that if you climb the rock, there'll be something will happen to you, or you will die, or there was some sort of superstition attached to it. The same is recorded by the archaeologists who were working, as they were not able to get local Sigiriya people from Sigiriya, so they had to get people all the way from Anuradhapura to work at Sigiriya. The site was rediscovered in 19th century. In 1833, Major Jonathan Forbes became the first European to visit the ruins after pushing through the dense forest. Later, expedition managed to expeditions managed to reach to the summit using a makeshift ladder. Former then came HCP Bell, Sri Lankan's first archaeological commissioner, who between 1895 to 1898 cleared the vegetation, documenting the structures on the summit, mapped the gardens, reservoirs, moats, fortification, and laid the foundation for the future research. He has published 6 reports, and these reports give detail of his experiences of uncovering Sigiriya. Really, it's an incredibly interesting to read how he discovered Sigiriya. And he had and when he reached the summit, what did he find? And he found large jungle, and when he cleared it, he started to find more and more evidence. And that time there was not much understanding of its history. And eventually, in later on, Sri Lankan archaeologists have also worked on it. But the work didn't continue largely post 1950s. After that, UNESCO recognized it in 1982, and eventually Sri Lanka created a central cultural fund which takes care of Sigiriya and maintains it beautifully. Perhaps the most impressive part of visiting Sigiriya, apart from its history, is the monument itself and how carefully it is maintained. The gardens are meticulously preserved, reservoirs are regularly cleaned, conservation projects continue in collaboration with the universities and archaeological institutions. Unlike many heritage sites where tourism overwhelms preservation, Sigiriya really demonstrate that both can coexist. As of 2026, a foreigner have to pay about 35 USD for entry, and also which includes also the on-site museum, while travelers from SAARC countries have to pay half of that. That fee sort of includes, walking around the museum and also the site. In India, many may argue that as an expensive ticket, but I really didn't find it expensive for what you are getting and the experience that you're getting by climbing the summit, and the way the site was completely clean and the people were well behaved. It really worth it. It also reflects a very principal questions then which many countries, including ours, really debate. Whether we should really increase the price of the tickets in India. And I advocate that we should increase the price of many monuments in India, especially for foreigners, because then we can reuse this money that one collects from monuments, including monuments like Kailashnath temples and Taj Mahal and other monuments which are highly visited by foreigners on regular basis. These monuments can help us generate good revenue, which can be used for its conservation and other important archaeological work, as I've seen and noted at many sites, including the site of Sigiriya. So the story of Sigiriya is still being unfolded. Archaeologists from University of Kelaniya, in the collaboration with Lathrop University, Australia, are preparing a new LIDAR survey. They have undertaken some, they're going to be doing more, and they believe that they're going to be find more evidence which are buried beneath the surrounding forest. Even now, nearly 2 centuries of excavation, Sigiriya still has secrets waiting buried underground. This is perhaps one of the greatest lessons of archaeology. Every monument has a story. Some belongs to mythology, other belongs to history, and sometimes history is even more dramatic than legend. For Sigiriya, it is not the palace of Ravana. It is a monument of a king driven by ambitions, guilt, fear, and an extraordinary desire to leave behind something immortal, and rightly so. For hundreds, 1500 years later, he has really succeeded because it is a marvelous sight and a must visit by many. So, with this, I would like to thank you for watching this video. And if you like it, please hit the like button and subscribe to the Print.